Welcome back, everybody. It's time for another edition of Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast covering the Las Vegas Raiders, also heard on the radio. Hearty hello to our folks in Las Vegas on 101.5 KDON and 840 KXNT. Scott Gulbransen and Mo Moton back with you. Mo's senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report, also Raiders columnist at sportsnet.com. You can follow him on X. If you already don't, what are you doing? Follow my man Maurice Moton at Mo Moton at Moemoton is how you spell it. I am at LV Gully. The show is SNB Today. We appreciate you guys being with us. Coming off the bye week, we were off Tuesday. Yeah, we took one show. We did two shows last week during the bye week, but we did take a little bit. Mo, you're busy. You and I were talking before we went on the air with your Bleacher Report duties. You're always completely swamped, and trade deadlines coming up, which I know we'll talk about with the Raiders here in a second. But you're busy, man. You and I were talking that it's been really quiet, which usually means there's going to be a deluge of trades coming up before Tuesday.
Yeah, pretty much prepare for that barrage of trades from Monday morning to Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern time, because that's what's going to exactly happen. It's been, as you said, quiet. I expect the Raiders to make at least one move. I know a lot of reports are that they're looking for defensive line help and cornerback help. I'm still holding out hope that they acquire Rick Woolen. A lot of people keep asking me, how does that make sense for a team that's 2-5 to be buyers? And I say, you're always looking for young talent, right?
Yep.
Because you're building toward the future. If Rick Woolen was 32 years old, then I would say it doesn't make sense.
Different story.
Rick Woolen is 26 years old, and he's still his rookie deal. You get the rest of his cheap rookie deal. You see how it works out with him and Pete Carroll Part 2 in Las Vegas. And if it does, you re-sign him, and now you have your cornerback 1 or 2 in the secondary. So, makes sense.
Absolutely. Also, just a quick personal note. Today is August 30th. 5 years ago today, I lost my good friend Brian Plumer. Was like a brother to me. Huge Raider fan. I know if you listen to me back when he passed on Raider Nation Radio, I dedicated my show to them. I'm dedicating it to him today on his anniversary. He would be going crazy right now with the Raiders and how they've been playing, like the rest of you. So just a shout out to him and his kids and his wife, remembering him on this day. All right, Mo, let's jump into some of the news items. First of all, the Raiders during the bye week sign Tyler Lockett. Yes, another Seattle Seahawk. And a lot of people comparing it to the Josh McDaniels bringing in a bunch of Patriot players. This is not unusual. When a coach has experience in another city with another team, they're familiar with players. They bring in players they're familiar with that they have some trust in. Tyler Lockett, I had a lot of people, and shout out to my man Kane, who's asking me, why? Why would you do this? What is this going to solve? And it's a really interesting question because is a signing of a free agent, in essence, somebody who was released by the Tennessee Titans, as was Tyler Lockett, what's this going to do for the Raiders? And the question isn't, it's not going to solve the Raiders' issues that we've seen all season. No, but a veteran receiver coming in is I think a good add. I'm not saying Tyler Lockett's going to change the trajectory of the Raider offense, but he is a sure-handed veteran. Now, is he past his prime? Yes. But I'm always curious because a lot of people are well, he's going to take snaps from the rookies. I don't think so. Number one. Number two is we'll get to the Jakobi Meyers stuff too, because Jakobi Meyers might be spending his last few days in Las Vegas. We don't know. We talked about the trade deadline to start the show. So, Mo, I want to get your reaction to the signing of Tyler Lockett and give your pitch to Raider fans why it's a good signing, a bad signing, or somewhere in the middle.
It's a reasonable signing. It's a signing that I thought was going to happen back in March before he signed with the Tennessee Titans. And so I was surprised that he made that pit stop before he got to Las Vegas and got the reunion with Geno Smith. But I don't understand why one move has to solve everything, because one move is not going to fix the Raiders. Newsflash. The Raiders need a bunch of things to help that football team. The other thing to note is the Raiders signed Geno Smith to a 2-year, $75 million extension, which means they're not going to give up on him quickly. So bringing in Tyler Lockett, his former receiver with the Seattle Seahawks, helps Geno Smith in that passing tackle. And by the way, the Raiders are 2-5. I know some fans want to be hopeless about this football team, 7 games into the season. But Scott, let's say they beat the Jaguars on Sunday. Then they're 3-5, right? I'm not saying that they're going to all of a sudden go on a run and make the playoffs, but all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, they can rattle off some wins. You never know what happens. You pull off an upset here and there. Who knows where they end up at, going from 3-5 for the remainder of the season. So this Tyler Lockett signing is not about taking snaps away from the young guys. Let's remember, they wanted to bring in Amari Cooper, and he retired within days of being with the team. So the Raiders have already been in the market for a veteran. And as you mentioned, it gives them some cushion just in case they do trade Jakobi Meyers, because they're still going to need a veteran, a set of hands in there with Trey Tucker and Dante Thornton Jr. and Jack Bash.
Right. And if they do move Jakobi Meyers, suddenly you have a spot there. You're getting rid of a veteran. Number 2 is Brock Bowers will be back Sunday against the Jaguars, which is fantastic news. But he was injured. You don't know how, if he's 100% great, if he's not 100%, he might not play as many snaps, number 1. Number 2, you don't know if that injury is re-aggravated. God forbid that happens. Nobody wants that to happen to the young player. But you have to always be, we talk about depth here all the time, right? You have to have depth. And to bring a veteran guy in, and then also to think about Geno Smith's headspace, Mo. So we know how terrible Geno Smith has been this year. There's no arguing that. But he's familiar with this guy. They had a lot of success together. And so also you're doing something for your veteran quarterback. You bring in a guy he's familiar with, so you have that. And to me, that's really important. Now, a lot of fans want the silent tank, right? Well, just play the rookies. And you and I have been advocating for weeks. Play the younger guys. You're not going to make the playoffs, so see what you got. Absolutely true. But remember, no matter how many of you want the coaching staff fired and you want this player gone or whatever, everybody's fighting for their job. If not for this year, for next year. Or they're making tape for themselves. So they're not going to tank in the sense that I think a lot of people want them to. And so you have to recall that when you look to fill your roster, you look for players that that you believe can be additive to the squad. And so I think that's where Tyler Lockett is. Again, not solving some major structural organizational issue. That's not what it's about. So you have to, and your point about Geno Smith is also well taken, Mo, because look, Geno Smith's terrible this year. The extension, the contract, he will be back next year. I really believe that. Now, something could happen between now and the end of the season. If he is just brutal, you see no improvement, the Raiders might make the decision to move on and eat it. But if they don't, especially if they do make a move to get a young quarterback in the upcoming draft, you still need that veteran. Yes, they have Kenny Pickett on the roster as well. But Geno Smith is a guy they've committed to. So you're going to have a veteran quarterback next year, even if you get a young quarterback. And Geno Smith, guys have bad years. Not saying that I believe Geno Smith will come back next year and be some kind of MVP candidate, but you have to be realistically look at it and think to yourself that no matter how bad he's played so far, he will be back next year. So that's that. Now, we look at the trade front, Mo, and some interesting reports over the past few days. And I'll start with our friend Jordan Schultz, of course, who's now with Bleacher Report, NFL Insider. And here's what he said. Sources, multiple teams have shown interest in trading for Raiders wide receiver Jakobi Meyers, who's in the final year of his contract, and has said, obviously, you guys know publicly, he wants to be traded. Here's what Schultz said, and I want to get your reaction to this. It was also repeated by Adam Schefter. Says, however, teams have had a hard time getting a clear read on whether Las Vegas is truly willing to move him. The belief is it would take at least a day 2 pick for the Raiders to even consider it. Now, Mo, here's my question for you on that. What would be the advantage of the Raiders? Now, look, I'm not saying you trade him for a 7th round pick. I've said for weeks that I believed it would be a round 5 pick, probably for Jakobi Meyers. But you look at this, why do you think if these reports are all accurate based on the insider reports, why would the Raiders be so rigid, if that's if indeed the case, why would they be so rigid in asking for so much for Jakobi Meyers if they're willing to hold on to him and just let him go at the end of the year?
Maybe they really don't want to trade him. I know that when you read these reports, you have to pay attention to the wording. There's a
Mhm.
difference between actively shopping a player and listening to offers for a player.
Right.
Actively shopping means we're parting ways. He's on the trade block. Listening to offers means he's on our roster. We want to keep him, but as a GM, front office, the job is to listen to all offers because you don't know what type of offer you're going to get. And that's why the Raiders are asking for a day 2 pick. In my opinion, it's we don't want to trade him, and it's going to take a lot for us to move him. So we're going to ask for a day 2 pick. And if we get that day 2 pick, then we'll budge.
Mm.
The other thing here is it could also be this is how you negotiate, right? You aim
Right.
high, and even if you don't get what you're asking for and you do get a fourth, it's better than getting what you might get, which is, as you mentioned, a 5th round pick, right? So a lot of people say, hey, he's worth about a 4th or a 5th round pick. So you aim high first. You don't start off with the low ball offer or the realistic offer. You aim high, see if you can get that. And if you don't, and you wind up a notch lower, then you get about the right value for that player, which you thought you were going to get in the first place.
Right. And to me, it also points to the fact that maybe, just maybe, they want Jakobi Meyers to be part of the longer term plan in Las Vegas. So they might be negotiating or thinking that they want to at least have conversations with Jakobi Meyers as the season progresses, as you get closer to the offseason as well, to say, hey, listen, we want you to be here. Depending on what their plans are, especially with the draft. Yeah, they need a quarterback. You can get good wide receivers in the draft. I've always been an advocate of going out and getting young wide receivers. They did that in the draft, obviously, with Jack Besh. And so you kind of have to play both games. You have to play, okay, how do we develop the young talent, but then how do we also have some sure-handed veterans? And while people will argue, is Jakobi Meyers a true number one? I don't believe he is. Is he borderline 2-1? Yeah. And so if that's the case, why not think about working it? So I agree with you. I think that if he doesn't get moved, that is a positive sign that they're at least trying to negotiate something. Now, Jacoby Myers not want to come back to the Raiders. He might say, "Yep, nope, nope," and the agent might say, "Nope, nope, nope, whatever," and the offer might not be what he wants. But it might also mean that they're having conversations, which is always a really good thing. So we'll see where that goes. I haven't seen anything, the Max Crosby stuff, which I always thought was crap. I didn't think they were going to move him. Mark Davis has said so. He's not going anywhere. And I believe that you and I have both expressed the belief that you want good, great players to build around. And as long as Max Crosby has not asked to leave Las Vegas, which there's been no indication of that thus far, then you do everything you can to build around him on that defense, which needs a lot of work as well. So we'll see how it goes. All right, we're up against our first break. When we come back, we're going to talk about this game coming up on Sunday. The Jaguars are in Las Vegas. The last time these two teams faced each other, the Raiders, of course, won 19-14. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about where that team is, what the Raiders need to do. What are we going to see off the bye week? We'd love to see progress, which we haven't seen week to week so far this season. We'd like to see progress on a lot of fronts. We'll talk through that here in just a minute. You're listening to and watching Silver and Black today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast on the radio in Las Vegas, 101.5 KDON and 840 KXND. Mr. Moton, Mr. Gulbransen coming back with you right after paying some bills. Don't go anywhere. All right, everybody, it's time to tell you about our good friends at Sleeper Picks. Of course, they bring you the video here all season long on Silver and Black today. The best way to play daily fantasy football. And not only that, not only is it the best way, but right now, if you go sign up, guess what? You're going to get a $20 entry for free. You don't even have to put a deposit. Just go get the Sleeper app, sign up for it, and bam, there's $20 in there as well. Not only that, but because you are a listener or a viewer of Silver and Black today, you're going to get a $100 deposit match up to $100 from our friends at Sleeper Picks. Just use the code GENTY. That's GENTY to get that match up there as well. Okay, Mo, we're going to look at Thursday night game, tonight's game. It is the Baltimore Ravens along with the Miami Dolphins, two teams that have not exactly been burning it up this season, but some interesting opportunities here. So give me and give the folks out there your picks. We need two from one team, one from the other. So let's get started, my friend.
So let's get started with the team that's going to actually win the football game, the Baltimore Ravens. I'll start with Lamar Jackson. Jim Harbaugh said he was going to be back last week. Didn't happen. Lamar says he feels fine. He's ready to go. So I believe Lamar Jackson over Jim Harbaugh. I think he's going to want to show off his legs, Scott. What is Lamar Jackson's rushing yards line?
So at 35.5 yards is one. The most popular right now, folks taking some action on daily fantasy is 25 plus yards, which to me is a absolute no-brainer
Absolutely.
there at a 1.24 multiplier. You want to choose that one?
Yeah, that's an easy one.
I know. That's
The
like,
Dolphins.
please.
The Dolphins do have a bit of a pass rush. They didn't trade away Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips yet, but they will eventually. I think they'll trade one of them. But for now, they're still on the edge. Lamar Jackson is going to have to use his legs a bit. And I think he's going to want to show off that, hey, I'm healthy again. So 25 plus rushing yards sounds pretty good for him.
Okay. Pick number 2.
Pick number 2, I'm going with Rashad Bateman, underrated wide receiver. I'll take the over on his receiving yard total. He feasts on the coverage that the Dolphins going to play. The Dolphins play some cover 2, and I think Rashad Bateman is going to show out. I know they have Zay Flowers there, but I think people forget about Rashad Bateman and the growth he's had over the last 2 years, and his lines are usually pretty low. And I'm looking at, what is that, 33.5 right there? I think he gets over that, and he gets to at least 40 against the Dolphins defense.
Nice. There you go. That's a 1.79 multiplier there. So Bateman is your second. Now we look at the Miami Dolphins.
Miami Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa, I understand he had a pretty good game last week. Woke up with an illness, swollen left eye, and he was slinging the football against the Atlanta Falcons, but he's going to be dinking and dunking against the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens defense look a lot better coming out of their bye week. Devon Achane, 25 receiving yards. He's going to be their workhorse playmaker. There is no Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle is there. Could be a trade candidate, by the way. But Devon Achane is going to be that guy. And 25 receiving yards looks like a lot of people are on that. I'm going to jump on that bandwagon as well.
All right. Good choices there. So you have Lamar Jackson, 25 plus rushing yards. Rashad Bateman, 33.5 receiving yards. And Devon Achane at 25 plus receiving yards. You put 20 on those daily fantasy picks, and you're going to make almost $60, $59.20 to be exact. So check it out. Make sure you go to the Sleeper app. Remember, $20 free deposit. You don't have to make any money. You don't have to put any money. You get $20 free to join Mo on his picks on the Sleeper app. Then you get a deposit match up to $100 using the code GENTY. That's the code GENTY, only from Silver and Black today. Of course, all rules and regulations are up on the Sleeper app or up on the Sleeper website. Rules and regulations always apply to that, of course. That's why I'm telling you to go read them. Also, not available in all states, but most likely it's available in your state. So check out Sleeper Picks for your daily fantasy football. Sponsors here of Silver and Black today. Welcome back. Segment number 2 here of Silver and Black today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast. Hello to our audience in Las Vegas on 101.5 KDON and 840 KXNT. Scott Gulbransen, Mo Moton back with you. We're talking Raiders. We went through the trade stuff. We went through Tyler Lockett, a little bit of that. This segment, we're talking about the game coming up on Sunday. The Raiders looking for that home win against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, a reminder as well, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your audio. Just look for Silver and Black today. Don't forget, rate and review. That helps us out significantly. We thank you for that. For our audience on the video side, hello. Also brought to you by our good friends at Sleeper Picks. Hopefully you enjoyed Mo's picks during the break. Get some money with Mo, right? Money Mo. He's Midtown Mo, but he's also Money Mo. So there you go. We hope you are enjoying that. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notifications bell, and the thumbs up on the video side as well. Okay, Mo, the Jacksonville Jaguars, you and I identified last week that this, before the Raiders get into a little bit more of a tougher slate, this might be a game that the Raiders might look to get off the schneid a little bit and get to that 3-5 record with the Jaguars coming in. This team, Jacksonville, started off as one of the big surprises in the NFL. They started off 4-1, and everybody's talking about, boy, this team could really start to hit their stride. They've now lost 2 in a row coming into this game. You look at what the Raiders need to do in order to not only fix some of their own problems, but to get on top of the Jaguars and beat them at home so that the Raider Nation can see their team win at Allegiant Stadium. Talk about the Jaguars, where they're at now, why they did so well, and now suddenly why they're struggling.
So they started off hot. Had two big wins back to back. Beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football. A week before that, they beat the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco. So this is not a team that is the same squad from last year. They've already matched their win total from 2024. What I think has happened to the Seattle Seahawks is, and I looked this up, they didn't force any turnovers in their last two games. This is a team that feeds off of forcing takeaways, and they didn't have that against the Seattle Seahawks. They lost by 8, low-scoring game, 20-12, and then they got blown out in London by the Rams. And the Rams are just a better football team, better operationally under Sean McVay. Sean McVay, by the way, had Liam Cohen on his coaching staff, so knows Liam Cohen very well and vice versa. But I wasn't surprised what happened to the Jaguars in London. This is a team that, while the record is 4-3 and is a decent record, they're still very sloppy, and it goes back to Trevor Lawrence. I'm totally out on Trevor Lawrence. Not that I was ever all the way in on him, but I remember when he was coming out of Clemson, he was talking about this transcendent talent. Other than beating the Chargers and coming back off of a ridiculous deficit in the playoffs a few years ago, what has Trevor Lawrence done in the NFL to make you think that he's one of the top cornerbacks in the league? He struggles with turnovers. And when the Jaguars aren't creating turnovers and he's making turnovers, they're not going to win many football games. I think the Raiders can take advantage of that. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a close game on Sunday between the Raiders and the Jaguars. Two teams who are coming off bad losses. The Raiders were shut up by the Chiefs. As I said, Jaguars blown out in London 35-7. These are two teams trying to get back and rebound. But the Jaguars have some weak spots where if they're not forcing turnovers, the pass defense, I know they have Greg Newsome in the second. They traded Tyson Campbell for Greg Newsome in the second in the secondary. The Jaguars are ranked 27th against the pass. If Dome Geno doesn't show up on Sunday, he is not going to show up this season because this is the moment when you're probably going to have a healthy Brock Bowers. Jacoby Meyers is back. Your former wide receiver, Tyler Lockett, is there. Bad pass defense. If Geno Smith doesn't look like similar to what he looked like last year at Seattle, it is not going to happen this season.
Yeah, and you look at this Jaguars team, offensively, they're middle of the road, right? So they're not, and you talked about Trevor Lawrence not being the player a lot of us thought he would be coming out of college. And I think coaching staffs and he's obviously doing better under Liam Cohen, but still not the guy that you expected. But you look at them on offense, 31st and third down efficiency. So the Raiders have some opportunity to, I think, shine on defense. They're 22nd in red zone offense from a TD percentage standpoint as well. So offensively, now on the defensive side, very interesting. They're on the lower side. They're 21 ranked overall, but rush defense. This is the one thing that I think is going to be the challenge for the Raiders and that offensive line and Ashton Genty is they're 6th against the run. So that defensive front for Jacksonville has done pretty well this season, Mo. And I think that this is going to be the big challenge for the Raiders. I mean, you talk about the pass. Obviously, there's great opportunity there for Geno Smith and Chip Kelly to expose and to take advantage of that pass defense. But when it comes to rushing, they're in the top 10.
They're in the top 10. And the thing is, the Raiders have struggled to run the ball in the first half of the season. They've struggled, to establish that. I don't expect much running on the ground from the Raiders. I think this is going to be a heavy passing game. As I pointed out again, that Jaguars is 27th against the pass, and you have all these offensive playmakers from Brock Bowers to Jakobi Meyers to Tyler Lockett to Trey Tucker, 2 rookies. They should be passing the ball anyway. So I don't expect, if you're expecting Genty to have 100 rushing yards, it's not going to be that type of football game. The Jaguars, as you said, pretty stout up front. They don't allow teams to run the ball on them. But as I said, they do allow some explosive plays over the top, and Geno Smith has to be able to exploit that. I know the Raiders have been a dink and dunk offense with Brock Bowers out and unhealthy or unhealthy. But assuming he's back, Scott, and he's at least 75%, the Raiders have to take some shots downfield because the plays will be there on the back end in the secondary.
Yeah, to me, this can't be a game again. I understand them wanting to get Geno Smith's confidence back. To your point about dink and dunk and kind of simplifying the offense. But you look at the Jaguars, And not only are they susceptible to passes and long passes, by the way, but that turnover ratio, you talked about that earlier. And this is to me the importance of Geno Smith having a good game. The Raiders are -5 in the turnover ratio, which is 26th in the NFL. The Jaguars are +8. They're tied for second. So you mentioned the last two games, they have not done that. They have not created turnovers, but early in the season, they did it so well that they're still tied for second as well. The other thing here, too, I think is important with the Raiders offense is to take advantage of situations. The Jaguars are also tied for 29th, meaning they have a ton of penalties. They have 65 penalties for 528 yards. Okay. And so to me, and the Raiders actually are seventh in the NFL. Not bad considering I know they've had some big penalties at terrible times. But that's another thing here is when the Raiders have an opportunity, one, on both sides of the ball to take advantage of penalties and to take advantage of those turnovers. So when you look at the defensive side for the Raiders, knowing what they're able to do and what they have done well. Of course, the Raiders' rush defense is middle of the pack as well. They're 17th overall, 20th against the pass. Talk about that defensively. If you're Patrick Graham, what's your plan against this Jaguars team that is susceptible, especially to pre-snap penalties?
See ball, get ball. If the ball hits the ground on a fumble or it's up in the air, you got to take advantage and get those takeaways. The Raiders have to get some, at least they have to win the turnover battle. I think that's key because the Jaguars are going to give it up at least once, I feel, in this football game between Trevor Lawrence's interceptions or just some mishap play, a tip drill, a fumble here or there. The Raiders have to pounce on the football. They have to be ready to get that takeaway. The other thing, though, is with Trevor Lawrence in the pocket, his propensity for interceptions, how is that pass defense? Who on that pass defense is going to come up with the takeaway on the back end if there's an errant pass? Because there will be some errant passes. Because I watched Trevor Lawrence a lot this year. His ball placement can be spotty. You thought Geno Smith was bad. I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence has been as bad, but his accuracy could be a bit off. Who in that secondary is going to come up with the takeaway? Is it Jeremy Chin? I know Isaiah Polamau was banged up before the Raiders went on their bye week. They're getting Lonnie Johnson Jr. back at safety, but he's not really a ball hawk. And this is why I say, even with Lonnie Johnson Jr. back, and bless his heart, he loves being a Raider and putting on that uniform. We saw him wear the uniform while he was out at his home. But the Raiders need a coverage safety, and they don't really have that right now. And I think that's what's missing from this secondary defense. When Pete Carroll was in Seattle, he had Earl Thomas III for most of his time in Seattle, and he 5'10", 5'11", but he knew how to track the football. The Raiders don't really have that defensive back in their secondary, and that's why I've been advocating for them to get Reek Willen, because at the beginning of Reek Willen's career, he had multiple interceptions. So Trevor Lawrence, when he's off, who's going to take advantage and rip those balls away and give the ball back to the offense?
And also, there's a lot of discussion this week in the press conference on Monday or Tuesday. They asked Pete Carroll about containing Travis Hunter. Of course, Travis Hunter, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, plays both ways for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But as a wide receiver, we know Trevor Lawrence, when he's on, can not only find his receivers, but he can also stretch the field. When you look at Travis Hunter, and again, it's a narrative, it's a story that's going to be played up because of who he is. What that defensive backfield for the Raiders, you talked about the vulnerability there. With a guy like Travis Hunter, this is the kind of game where playing against a defense that's had trouble and given up big plays, especially in open space, what are they going to have to do to contain him?
Make sure he doesn't get behind the secondary. Make sure he doesn't get behind anybody on that defense. Keep Travis Hunter in front of you. Brian Thomas Jr. has struggled a bit. I know he came up with trade rumors. I highly doubt the Jaguars trade him. But reports are that the Jaguars are going to treat Travis Hunter as their wide receiver one in the second half of the season. And if that is the case, he's a big play receiver. And I know it hasn't looked like maybe what the Jaguars thought it would be in the first half of it, but he could really pick up some steam starting with the Raiders in Las Vegas if the Raiders allow him to get behind that defense and get those 15, 20-yard chunk plays on the back end. So make sure Travis Hunter stays in front of you. Do not allow Travis Hunter to stretch the defense and get those big plays, those explosive plays, because it could be backbreaking for the Raiders defense.
And I wanna go back for a second to Trevor Lawrence, because one of the things with Trevor Lawrence coming out of college was he was not only functionally mobile, but he could run the ball really well. He does that less, obviously, in the NFL for obvious reasons. But how important is the Raiders, or is it for the Raiders to contain him when the pocket breaks down? Um, Travis Lawrence, if you give him too much space, he will run the ball and he can hurt you significantly there. You look at that game plan and what the defensive front has to do, what that linebacking core has to do. What's the danger? We know the advantages the Raiders have. You talked about the tip balls, the errant throws that come from Trevor Lawrence quite a bit. What do they have to do as far as containing him so he doesn't hurt them, especially in those short yardage situations with the run?
When the play breaks down, Devin White and Landon Roberts have to go downhill because if the play does break down, Trevor Lawrence can move with the football and move pretty well. I believe he had 2 rushing touchdowns against the Kansas City Chiefs when they beat them on Monday night, including that game-winning touchdown late where he fell down, got back up, and then scored. So Devin White and Landon Roberts have to be on high alert that when those passing lanes are covered or you have help on and back behind you, make sure Trevor Lawrence doesn't take off for that first down because he could definitely move the chains with his legs, and it's not a first resort for him, but it's something that happens when he extends plays, and that's what you have to look out for.
All right, Mo. So in the few seconds we have left before we hit our final break, give me your prediction for this game. I know you already said it was going to be close, but let's you and I put some Nostradamus hats on or turbans on and predict how this one's going to end up.
I'll say Raiders cover but don't win 28-26. That's exactly how I did in my Bleacher Report piece this week, that I strongly feel like the Raiders cover with the healthy Brock Bowers, and this is a battle with some points put on the board. I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders outright won. I'll say it again because people are going to come back into this prediction. Wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders outright won, but I think it's like a 1 or 2 point game either way.
There you go. I also think that too, although I'm gonna pick, I have no reason to, and I've been saying for weeks that I would not pick the Raiders to win. Coming off the bye week, I'm gonna give some positivity to Raider Nation there. I think the Raiders take this 24-23. I agree with you. It's gonna be a very close game. And I think we see Geno Smith, not the Geno Smith of week 1, but better. The addition of Brock Bowers, the addition of Tyler Lockett. I also think Michael Mayer will play his role as well in this game. So I like that. I think it's going to be hard for them to rush the ball. You're absolutely right. So if they can pass successfully, I like them to win by a point at home at Allegiant Stadium. All right, we're going to take our break. When we come back, we're going to get to your phone calls. It's time for the Raider Nation Switchboard. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everybody. Home stretch here. The final segment of this edition of Silver and Black today at Odyssey Sports original podcast, also heard in Las Vegas on 101.5 KDON and 840 KXNT on the radio. Mo Moton, Scott Gulbransen back with you talking Raiders football. Now, let's get to these calls, Mo, and see if maybe the week off has Raider Nation thinking a little more positively, thinking forward-looking versus backward-looking. We'll have to see. So let's get the heartbeat of what Raider Nation is feeling at this moment. What's your bet, Mo? Is Raider Nation still upset enough where they're going to be talking about all of the things that are wrong, or might we feel some positivity?
I wouldn't say positivity. Maybe this is just me projecting, but I feel like a lot of calls are going to give the Raiders one more chance to get this together coming out of the bye week. And if it doesn't, and if it still looks bad with a healthy Brock Bowers, then I think people are like, I'm out. If they can't get it together with a healthy Brock Bowers against a bad Jaguars pass defense, I'm out for the rest of the season. But they have a chance to reel a lot of people back in with the win. As I said, going 3-5, the record doesn't look that bad. I know we're talking about this Raider team as they're a one-win team or a winless team, but they win, they're all of a sudden 3-5, and who knows? As I said, the second half of the season with 9 games left, what happens?
Absolutely. For those of you who want them to tank, you probably don't want them to win, as crazy as that sounds, but absolutely, to get to 3-5 would be somewhat of a change in direction. Okay, let's get out to our first call. Jay in Pennsylvania.
Hey guys, it's Jay from PA. I just wanted to call in, and I had a statement, and then I'll talk about what Scott challenged us to do and what we would do. My first statement is, why does everybody keep saying we can't fire a coach? We fired too many coaches. Here's the problem. We fire coaches mid-season. Who'd we fire? Gruden resigned because of bullshit where the NFL targeted him. Was he wrong? Yeah, but that was targeted. We fired McDaniels a year and a half in. Those are and I don't count AP because that was a joke. That was based off pure emotion hire. Rich Bisaccia was not fired. He was an interim head coach. AP was technically an interim head coach who should have never got the coaching job. We're not cycling through coaches like everybody says we are. Everybody thinks we're firing a coach once a year. If you take away mid-season fires, there's a big difference between how many coaches we quote-unquote fired. Just annoying at this point that people want to bang their head off a wall and think consistency automatically means wins. It doesn't. If it's not working, it's not working. Now, if I was the GM, I'm sitting down with Carroll and I'm saying, you got to fire your son. This is to the point where Raider Nation wants a pound of flesh for what's going on. I'm sorry if I break up here. I'm going through a bit of a dry spot. Pete Carroll has to sit down with his sons, explain what's going on. I'm sure they'll get a coaching job somewhere in college. Probably won't be the NFL because I'm not familiar with their history. It was kind of abrupt to give the O-line son a coaching job. But you got to make changes. You got to show Raider Nation that it's not all about your guys. Like Oprah handing out 10 interceptions through the season already. Fire your sons. Show Raider Nation they are more important than your guys. That's how I would handle it. Want to know your guys' thoughts? I hope my call didn't break up too much. Thanks for everything, guys. Appreciate you.
All right, Jay in Pennsylvania, thanks for the call. 2 points there, Mo. Number one, let's start with the first one about the perception that the Raiders go through a lot of coaches. Do you see do you see his point there about how this has gone, especially since the second Gruden era and going through him, then Josh McDaniels, and then, of course, Antonio Pierce? Rich Bisaccia, as he said, was an interim head coach. He wasn't fired. He just wasn't hired as the full-time afterward.
Yeah, I could see what Jay is saying. I think the sentiment is that some fans want continuity for continuity's sake. And I think 2 weeks ago, Scott, you and I were both on the show and saying, hey, if it's not working, you got to make it. You got to make a change. But you can also see the point that you have to sometimes let things cook, as the kids say. And I'm of older generation. I'm not sure how old Jay is, but sometimes you got to let it marinate. And there are other examples. And I'm not saying Pete Carroll is Dan Campbell. But I remember when Dan Campbell started, and it didn't look good at the beginning. It actually sounded comical. He talked about biting kneecaps, and people were looking at this guy, this is not going to work out. Nick Sirianni, his first presser was very clunky. You could tell he was not a major in public speaking. Terrible at the mic. Talked about watering plants and whatnot, and people were like, what is he talking about? So Mike McDaniel, when he first got the job and people see his stature, Mike McDaniel is a short, small dude. And I know it's not going well in Miami now, but this is a team that was competitive before this season. They were pretty much a borderline playoff team. And now people are like, oh, maybe it could work for him as an offensive coordinator. Now, Pete Carroll is not as young as any of those guys. I'm not comparing age-wise. Pete Carroll, we know who he is as a known commodity. And if you know it's not working, then you move on. That's where I'm with Jay. Whereas this isn't a young guy trying to build a resume, and you kind of have to wait and see what he is. We know what Pete Carroll is, and it looks outdated. And that's why I say at the end of the season, I think you evaluate that. You don't do that in the middle of the season. We talked about this, Scott. A person of Pete Carroll's stature is not getting fired in the middle of the season. It's just not going to happen. It's not the way people do business in the NFL. But at the end of the year, if you look at the games and say, well, Pete Carroll's defense, the influence he's had on that defense is pretty outdated and we need a fresh look, then you move on. If it's not working, it's not working, regardless of who it is. So I see it from Jay's side, but I also see it where some people are saying, well, let's just build something with someone. Let's not like, for whatever reason, whether a coach resigns or is not hired, let's stick with a coach for more than a year and a half.
Right. And the John Gruden thing, as he said, was a strange situation. So I don't even really count that because of that was some external pressures and some craziness that happened. And then with Josh McDaniels, it's one of the times because I agree. Often coaches will get fired for performance mid-season because things are going so poorly. But usually it's not just because they're losing games. And in Josh McDaniels, we know he was toxic, right? And so the ownership at that point says, well, yeah, it's not optimal to fire a guy. We could wait till the end of the season, but it was becoming so toxic for that locker room and the way he treated people and the way he manipulated people. This is all recorded. I'm not making these assumptions. We've seen this and players have said it. So that was an extraordinary circumstance too, which is why it happened. And then the Antonio Pierce, you and I have been on the record so many times, we don't need to relitigate that. But I think with Pete Carroll, I think people want to get rid of him so quickly because he had such a good pedigree coming in and it's gone so poorly. So that's number one. Number two, firing his sons. Not going to happen. Just it's not going to happen during the season, right? And I will say this, I don't mind saying this. Both of his sons, of course, his one son is on the defensive back side, and then his son Brennan, who coaches the offensive line, their resumes are as light as you and I, man. As other than just being around football and working for their dad, they have no accomplishments to speak of that would elevate them to the positions they've had. Then you look at the performance so far, and it builds up that point even more. So I would say, Jay, as much as I agree with you that I think the Raiders need to move on from both of them, it's not going to happen this year, and we'll see how they deal with it during the offseason so that dad can let the kids off with and save face and maybe go get some other jobs. So we'll see what happens there. Thanks for the call. All right, now we're going out to Jesse in Arizona.
Scott, Mo, this is Jesse from Arizona. I just saw the news that we signed Tyler Lockett. Oh, we all called it, I'm pretty sure, right? What the hell is that for, man? I mean, yeah, could we use some veteran presence? Sure. But I feel like at this point in the game, we should be developing our young core, like Mo said. Like, you know, we're not playing for the Super Bowl. We're not playing for playoffs. We're playing not to get our asses whooped. And at this point, I'm like, okay, well then put the young guys in. Let's get freaking Jack Betch going, and let's develop these guys and see what they're going to bring to us for next year. That's just so annoying, man. I'm not understanding this. Funny side note, I was listening to a podcast and the guy kept about the Lakers, and the guy kept talking about, oh, you know, the basketball team came to compete, that, you know, and I was just like, getting so damn annoyed, man. And this is where I'm at. I'm so annoyed that I can't even hear the damn word compete anymore because I associate it with Pete Carroll's dumb decision making. And I just hear him I just hear him at the freaking podium talking about, oh yeah, they're compete. Everybody's compete. It's competition. It's like, no, it's not a competition. There's only like 2 players that are in a freaking competition, and one happens to be probably your best offensive lineman who you're trying to develop. Not. All right, man. That's enough of what I've got. Anyways, hope you guys have a good week. Have a good one.
A frustrated Jesse in Arizona. Thanks for the call. And what we talked about at the beginning of the show about the signing of Tyler Lockett. What's interesting too, and again, I don't expect fans to dive into the numbers as much as you and I do because of what we do, but Jack Betch has played over 80% of the snaps the last 2 games. And before that, it was 50%. So Jack Betch is getting time. The other thing to consider here is you and I both agree with the premise where the Raiders are at. Try to play your young players, get them experience, see what you got. But that doesn't mean they will succeed. So if you put Jack Betch, and I'm not saying this will happen, maybe he shines, but if you put Jack Betch out there or some of the other young receivers, some of the other younger players on defense, for example, and they don't do well, then what do? Do you just let them play? Yeah, you do, but you also don't want to destroy their confidence. You want to coach them up. You want to develop them. You still need guys who can catch the ball. If Jack Betch goes out there and drops 5 passes in a row, again, I don't think he will, but let's say he did, you got to have that. And this is where I think that people misunderstand that they're going to rob young players of opportunity. I don't think that's going to happen here at all. You have to hedge your bets. You have to have depth, especially if Jakobi Meyers goes, they do trade him. great. If they don't, fine. You still have a veteran guy there. And again, I go back to the familiarity with Geno Smith.
Yeah, this goes back to what I said earlier. I don't think Tyler Lockett is going to play a ton of snaps, number one. Tyler Lockett is 33 years old.
Right.
So I don't think he's going to play a ton of snaps. As I said, the Raiders wanted Amari Cooper there with the young rookies. So they had already been in the market for a veteran wide receiver. But I also think that this is an indication, not a clear indication that they're going to trade Myers, but I think this is an indication it's a real possibility. And again, if they do trade Myers, then Tyler Lockett can kind of slip in because of his connection with Geno Smith. But I've been saying for weeks now they should play young guys, play the young guys. Now, if they were bringing in a premier wide receiver, then I would say, yeah, he's going to take snaps away from the rookies. But I don't expect Tyler Lockett to play more than 50% of the snaps, really, because he's further along in his career, and especially if the Raiders lose. I could see Jack Besh and Dante Thornton Jr. getting just as many, if not more, snaps than he does.
Right. And we're just about halfway through the season. Injuries happen. So somebody goes down, whether it's Besh, whether it's Jakobi Meyers again, because he's coming off an injury, whatever it is, you still need depth there. So you got a veteran out there. So at least you know what you're getting. So if something happens, then you have a guy there. You don't have to scramble to find somebody. You have somebody already on the roster. So, all right, Jesse, again, thank you for your call. All right, now we're moving on.
Hilarious call, though. His frustration with the word compete. Frustration with the word compete was hilarious.
Yes, it was. And I agree with him. I'm not disagreeing.
I do too.
With the Suns. Look, and I would say that to those guys' faces, because it's like, what have you done? Just show me. All right, here we go. On to the next call.
Hey guys, LA Crash Dog from SoCal. I'm going to be 56 years old in November. I'm lucky enough to have been able to see the games from the 60s and 70s, the greatness of the old Raiders. I feel bad for these new fans who've only seen the last 20 years. God, they must think, why is our mantra just win, baby? Because they haven't seen any of it. And then I was really happy when AP started bringing back the swagger, and the attitude. He was not prepared to be a head coach. That was evidently abundantly clear. But he did bring back that Raiders swagger, and especially on the defense, man. The guys were out there flying around, being physical, and I saw it coming back, and I thought Pete was going to come in here after the Legion of Boom and just kind of increase that or build upon that. And instead, he got rid of all those guys. And it's not working. And now I'm like, well, what do we do now? We need a freaking quarterback. And we don't have anyone to trade off to get the picks that we're going to need to reach a quarterback. So what the heck are we going to do? Now we got to wait. We got to do this for 2 years? Because they're going to win meaningless games towards the end of the year. That's for sure. They're going to push us way down, and we're not going to be high enough. And we don't have the guys to trade to get high enough. So I don't know what we're going to do. They're not going to get rid of Pete. Not this next year at least. I don't know. What do you guys think? All right, guys. Doing a great job as always. I appreciate you. Look forward to listening to you every week. Just win, baby. But just not this year.
I love that. That's a great call. And listen, Mo, I'm going to start with this. I think Raider Nation's getting mad when I say this, okay? I'll preface it with that. But the swagger argument, I get it. And did Antonio Pierce bring back the swagger from a talking perspective? Absolutely. And I value that. I understand it, right? Raider fans know the history of the franchise and they like that. But he talked the talk, but not walk the walk. Did players play hard for him? Yeah, I would argue they did. They were a 4-win team. So when you talk about not bringing some guys back, now there are a couple I can see why fans are upset that they didn't bring back some of the players. But I just don't. I think it's hollow. If you want your team to have swagger and they win 4 games, do you feel better about it? I wouldn't. I want them to have swagger and win. Like, as you said, LA Dog, it's about winning. Just win, baby, right? So that's number one. And number two, his point towards the end there, really interesting. Give me your reaction.
To just win, baby, but just not just hear that part. It was
That's part of it. But see, the part about the quarterback, though, Mo, listen, you don't have to be a top 5 pick to get a top 5 pick. Now, I understand it's harder. If you're in the top 3, we know the Jets need a quarterback. There's other teams that need quarterbacks that are down there. The Saints need a quarterback. They're going to be at the top of the draft, most likely. So it's harder, but there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Right. Here's the thing, and he's right. The Raiders are going to win some games. I don't want to call them meaningless, but the Raiders are going to win some games to push down their draft position. They still have to play the Browns this year. The Giants are starting to fall apart around Jackson Dart. Who knows who's going to be playing by the time those two teams square off in, what is it, week 17? So you're looking at, I think the Raiders are going to finish with, at this point, around 5 wins, right? Let's say that gets you pick, 8 or 9, and you're behind 3 or 4 teams that need a quarterback. The Browns are being another one of those teams. The Raiders are either A, going to have to mortgage the future and move up, or B, they're going to have to, I don't want to say settle, but maybe they take a look at a quarterback in the second round.
Right.
And you said it, Scott, you don't necessarily have to draft a quarterback number 1 overall or in the top 3 to find your franchise guy. I'm old enough to remember Lamar Jackson being the last pick in the first round, and look at him now.
Mahomes was number 10.
I know Mahomes was 10. You got Jalen Hurts, who questionable passer, but he's been in 2 Super Bowls and played pretty well in one of them that they won. He was a second round pick. So I think, and I said this on Twitter and I've said it on the show plenty of times, the Raiders, regardless of what happens, where they're drafting, who's on the roster, must draft a quarterback before day 3 until they find their franchise quarterback. You draft the guy. You draft 2 guys if you want to. A lot of people laughed at the Browns for drafting Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. So what? They took some swings. Now they're finding out that Dylan Gabriel isn't that guy. But Jimmy Haslam has already, Browns owner Jimmy Haslam has already come out and said they made a mistake signing Deshaun Watson to their fully guaranteed $230 million contract. So what does that mean, Scott? They're going to spin their wheels and keep taking swings until they find their guy. They took 2 swings this year. Dylan Gabriel, not it. Seems like they're not ready to play Shedeur Sanders. They're going to probably take another swing next year. And the Raiders should be on the same track. I get it. Jamarcus Russell happened, 18 years ago, right? You got to get over that. When you were a kid, Scott, and you fell off your bicycle and you scraped your knee, did you just stay off your bicycle and never ride it again? No. You got to get back on the horse. You got to get back on the bicycle. Try it again. Right. Take more swings. Find your quarterback, Raiders.
Right, and I know he struggled the last couple of weeks, but Jackson Dart went 25th overall, and it was a terrible quarterback draft. Right, it was a terrible quarterback draft. Now, everybody's focused on the top 3 quarterbacks coming up in this draft, including Mendoza. Shout out to the Cuban-American Mendoza. But there's other guys too, and if the Raiders like a guy and they're at 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, and they like him, take the swing, right? You got to take the swing. Yes, you need offensive linemen, you need defensive linemen, you need defensive backs. I get it. But there's opportunity. You could also trade into the bottom of the second round and get a guy so you get one of those other positions. So there's a lot of things to do there, so don't lose hope on that one. All right, man, thanks for the call. Now we're going out to Denver, enemy territory with Raider Eddie.
Hey, guys, what's up? This is Raider Eddie in Denver. Scott and Mo, I want to talk about the Tyler Lockett acquisition, and I want to compare that against other things that they've done at the wide receiver position. And in general, though, guys, to me, I don't like the acquisition. I think this is going away from a youth movement that we should be seeing from this team, namely seeing what we have in our second-round pick, Jack Bech. By the way, I don't think the Raiders are in a position to not develop and not play a second-round pick that we just got, and he's barely even played. We also have Trey Tucker, who I think is emerging. He's a really nice player, nice young player. And we also have Thornton Jr., who I believe has some real potential, especially as a deep threat. So, guys, help me out here. Why are the Raiders going away from the youth movement? Why are they bringing in an older player? And on top of all of this, guys, they haven't figured out the Jakobi Meyers situation. Okay. I don't think it takes a genius to kind of decide if you're going to rebuild the culture of the team, who are some of the veterans you want to ride with? Max Crosby, Jakobi Meyers. These are generally guys that put football first. They're reliable. They're not divas. You're going to get Jakobi for a good rate. You know, he's not going to be the most expensive wide receiver in the league, but he's the kind of guy that I think you want in a rebuild, the kind of culture and the tone that you want to set. And they haven't figured out that one yet. So to me, guys, this screams of an older Pete Carroll bringing in an older player, not developing the young guys. We're going in the wrong direction, in my opinion. I'm very frustrated by this team right now. Help me out, guys. Is there something I'm missing? To me, it's just a bad move on top of some other bad moves in that wide receiver room. So just talk to me, guys, and let me know your thoughts. Raider Eddie in Denver out.
All right, Raider Eddie. Couple things I want again, and you could check me on it. Don't just take my word for it. Jack Besh, the last 2 games, has played over 80% of the snaps. He's getting an opportunity because they can't pass the ball is not his fault, but he is out there. So I think the misconception there is because last game they ran 30 plays. There's no opportunities for anybody when you only run 30 plays in the entire freaking game. Number one. Number two is I caution everybody out there. Don't always think or say things with absolution. Like, it's not absolute. You can develop young players and sign a veteran receiver for depth and whatnot. I understand the frustration and the idea that, oh, Pete Carroll's bringing in another Seattle guy, another guy past his prime. That's partially true. But we talked a lot about this throughout the show about the Lockett signing, Mo. But I don't think that bringing in a veteran like that who's not costing you anything is going to hurt anything. I'm not saying it solves major problems either, but I just think thinking in absolutes like that doesn't necessarily reflect the situation.
So I'll help you out here, Raider Eddie. And I'll say, first thing I will say is I do agree with you, Raider Eddie. And we've said it on the show. The Raiders need to develop their young talent. As Scott said, you could still do both in a sense. What you don't want is Tyler Lockett taking 80% of the snaps and
Right.
Dante Thornton Jr. and Jack Besh taking 20%. That's what you don't want. So we'll see what the snap distribution looks like on Sunday. And then I'll reserve judgment on, is it hurting the youth or helping you? Because Tyler Lockett, by the way, is good for the locker room, and he can also help some of those young guys develop.
Yes.
The other point here is, and I didn't make this point in the first segment, is this move, I believe, is the Raiders trying to help Geno Smith's confidence, right? So Geno Smith has been throwing pick after pick. He's tied with Tua Tagovailoa for the most interceptions in the league. He's been dinking and dunking. I know Tyler Lockett is not a field stretcher, but the Raiders invested a 3rd-round pick and, again, signed Geno Smith to a 2-year, $75 million extension. They're going to try to make the most out of that investment. And how do you do that? You bring in players that Geno Smith is familiar with. Now, again, I wouldn't play Tyler Lockett 75. I wouldn't play him for more than 50% of the snaps because I do want the young wide receivers, Dante Thornton Jr. and Jack Besh, to develop. But if you're trying to build the confidence of your quarterback, this is one of the things you do. You bring in a familiar target, a familiar face to help that passing offense get going.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, Raider Eddie, thanks for the call. Hang in there, man. We appreciate it as always. All right, now we're going out to our buddy Anders in Oakland.
Hi, fellas. It's Anders from Oakland. I don't know if this is relevant or not, but I thought I'd leave you a message in terms of, I promise I haven't said something about strategy. So I'm going to focus on Mark Davis, the man with no strategy for the last 14 years. And I think his biggest issue is that he just doesn't ask the right questions. And I'm going to illustrate that with an example. When Sprytek and Brady claimed this vision of building a long-term sustainable program through the draft and player development, that's what they said they were going to do. The key to that then is continuity. So Davis should have asked them a pretty simple question. Why would you hire a 73-year-old coach who will be here for 3 years max, and whose record the last 3 seasons he coached was 25-26? And the reason you should have asked that question is that we know that the coach who will succeed him will have a sizable ego, all good coaches do, and he'll want to have his guys, his culture, his scheme, etc. He's not just going to continue doing what the previous coach did, even if it worked. He will reset, Gruden reset, Carroll reset, they all reset. So given that reality, Davis just asked a simple question, why hire a short-termer? He would have gotten a really weak answer, because there isn't a good answer beyond we'll have an adult in the room. But that was just a reflexive reaction to the AP experiment, I think. Strategically, hiring Carroll made no sense, because the coach replacing him will scrap most of what he built, and I use that term loosely, regardless. And as an owner, Davis has to know that. If he doesn't, there's kind of no hope. So successful people, they ask the right questions, evaluate the answers, and then make the right call. Sadly, Davis did none of those. And that also brings me to the personnel decisions that Brady and Spytek have made today, but that's for another call. Keen to hear what you guys think. Thanks.
All right, our man Anders, always good stuff coming from his business perspective. And he's right there. I think a couple things to point out here, Mo. One is they took a big swing at the younger guys, right? So this idea that Brady and Spytek, we know about Johnson, of course, which was much more of a favor to Brady to take the interview rather than him wanting it. And Johnson, despite the fact the Bears struggle at times and of course lost a big game this past weekend to the Browns, they were on that. They couldn't deliver on that this time. And so I think part of that, and I don't disagree with anything he said, but to think that you're going to go from all that dysfunction and having Mark Davis not ask the right questions, you get guys in the room, so to speak, with Brady and Spytek who are better, or at least we think they are. To think it was going to change overnight, I think was not realistic, number one. And number two, Carroll was always a fallback plan. They had to get somebody in there. And I think they were just buying some time. And I really do believe, no matter what was said publicly by Pete Carroll, that the head shed, so to speak, the front office and everybody in leadership at the Raiders, I don't think that they believe this year was going to be some breakout year and that they were going to compete for a playoff spot. I think they knew some of this was coming. Of course, nobody saw Geno Smith coming out and playing as poorly as he had. So maybe it's worse than they perhaps thought it could be. But he's absolutely right about strategy. That's why I've advocated for getting somebody in there to take away that decision-making from Mark Davis and just sign the checks and let somebody do the work. What do you think, Mo? I mean, were fans and everyone, were they expecting too much change too quickly after all those years, as he mentioned, 14 years of not making great decisions?
Number one, I'll say this reeks of emergency plan B. So you don't get your first option. What's the best of the leftover options? I know that sounds as painful to say as a Raider fan that you get leftovers, but you technically you want a young offensive mind, right? And they, as you said, they went after Ben Johnson. He took the interview as a favor to Tom Brady. Liam Cohen wasn't even on the radar. He winds up in Jacksonville. Joe Brady stays in Buffalo. So the pool was limited as far as younger guys are concerned. Mike Vrabel goes to the Patriots, and we kind of knew that was going to happen. And he's rebuilt that team quickly. You see that team already at the top of the AFC East right now. But one, I think the Raiders' pool of quality candidates was limited. Again, I don't know that for sure, but based on them moving from Ben Johnson to Pete Carroll kind of indicates that, right? That there was no other young offensive-minded coach or young defensive-minded coach that they could get. I believe there's a report out this past week that, you know, they offered Robert Saleh and he turned it down to be on staff. So behind the scenes, and this doesn't get let out, I'm sure the Raiders have reached out to some of these quality or up-and-coming coaches, and they just simply said, no, I'm good. I don't want that position. And I know a lot of people will say, well, head coach positions of a head coach in the NFL are, you know, there are only 32 of them. So It's going to be attractive. But if you look at the Raiders situation, right, they didn't have immediate resources to get a young quarterback.
Right.
You can look at the roster and tell that it had a lot of holes and needed a lot of work. And some coaches are going to look at the Raiders situation and goes, this is not appealing to me. You know, why did Jim Harbaugh wind up in Los Angeles? Let's be honest. As much as a lot of Raider fans don't like to give Herbert praise, but having that young quarterback, even with the Spanos family doing what they've done with that franchise, having a young quarterback and having pieces on the roster absolutely matters. And this is why you wind up with a Pete Carroll. And this is no disrespect to Pete Carroll, but he's been known as a program builder. And I think some fans fell in love with that. Okay, he's known, he has a history of building programs, because we talked about on the show, Scott, from USC to Seattle. He's built programs, and that's what the Raiders needed. The problem, as Anders pointed out, is with his short-term stay, likely 2 to 3 years, if it didn't work out the first year, you burn a year of having a down season. Now what? Now you have to get it together next year. And if it doesn't get together next year, you're already thinking about turnover after Pete Carroll the following year. So you're resetting again. And that's the flaw in the hiring process.
Well, and to your point, you make the perfect point here, which is the job appealing? Yes, there's only 32 of them. So there's always going to be somebody who will take an NFL job because it's an NFL job.
Of course.
At the same time, you have to, and I think the thinking here was, and you and I said it on this show, Pete Carroll comes in, steadies the ship. Now, he hasn't done that. Now, listen, I'm not saying, like you said earlier, this team's not going to make the playoffs, okay? They're not going to go on some big run and make the playoffs. I just don't know. There's been no indication that it's even possible.
No.
But if they can show improvement, get to a point towards the end of the year, and I know that means winning games and all that. Maybe it doesn't mean winning games. Maybe it means they're in games they shouldn't be in, or they're at least playing solid football. Then suddenly you say, okay, then they go get a quarterback. Okay. Then you say, well, now they got a quarterback. Yeah, there's holes, but they got a quarterback to build around. They have a running back to build around in Ashton Genty because they made him the pick last year. You have Max Crosby, another reason why you don't trade Max Crosby. You have Max Crosby on the defense. Hey, I got 2 stars and 1 potential, perhaps, in a quarterback to build around. Now, if Pete Carroll steadies the ship, again, he has to steady the ship. If he steadies the ship, then to your point, that job becomes more appealing, right? Then you can go get that long-term vision guy, and some of these guys who said no this time might be willing to say, you know what? Now I see that they got it pointed in the right direction. There's not massive holes at quarterback. There's not massive hole. You don't have any defensive stars because you traded away Max Crosby and you got nobody there, right? So to me, that is exactly the reason. And so you kind of have to see through that a little bit, but we'll see if Pete Carroll can pull it together, because they need to pull it together and make this job more appealing. And again, it might be 2 years down the road, because I still think Pete Carroll will be back next year unless the wheels continue to fall off and it just gets worse and worse and worse all year and you have no choice. So we'll see. But Anders, always, man, great calls, such value.
Call.
Yep. Always. Yeah. All right. We're going to close out the show. Our final call is our buddy Tarek up in Chicago.
Scott, Mo, good morning. This is Tarek calling you guys from Custer Park, Illinois. Just want to talk about the Raiders as we are wrapping up our bye. I'm going to do everything I can to try to approach the post-bye remainder of the season with some optimism, kind of like what Yandog alluded to recently. I'm not really particularly excited about Tyler Lockett. He's been irrelevant for the last 2 or 3 years. We'll see what that looks like. Still think it's a bad look with regards to Jakobi Meyers, but let's really, really hope that now that the bye week is concluded, that we've figured some things out, that we've made some logical adjustments, and that it doesn't look so obvious that we're playing favorites. Let's get Tonka Hemingway, JJ Progress in there, some playing time, quality playing time. Let them cut their teeth as rookies. Same goes with Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant. Please retire the Alex Kappa experiment and just solidify JPJ at right guard. Can we please retire the Caillou Blue Kelly experiment? I mean, he has been absolutely dreadful. Love to see Darian Porter in there for some quality minutes as well. Please run the football no matter what. Give Gentis at least 20 to 25 touches, and if they're shutting down the run, find some creative ways to get him the football. It'll be nice to have Brock Bowers back. The Jaguars, I mean, they're hit and miss, but I'm taking the Jaguars by at least 2 touchdowns in this football game. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about some of these ideas. suggestions. I know you guys have been kind of beating some of these drums yourself. Have a fantastic week, and I'll talk to you guys later.
All right, our man Tarek there up in Chicago. As always, brother, thank you for the call. Yeah, I mean, he says a lot of the same things we say. And look, last thing I'll say about Tyler Lockett, we've talked a lot about him. I'm not saying people should be excited about it. It's not something like, oh, Lockett. It's not Tyler Lockett from 6 years ago. It's just a depth piece, man. That's all it is. Mo, your reaction to Tarek's call?
Yeah, I agree with a lot what he said. I've been talking about Darian Porter for quite some time. I want to shout out to my guy, Jesse Merrick, who's doing the Silver and Black Sports Network over there on his own. Shout out to him. But he was talking to Levi Edwards, who works for the Raiders, Raiders.com, and they were talking about Kyu Blu Kelly and Darian Porter. And I picked up on the conversation. They were saying, you got to keep in mind that Darian Porter has only played one full year at cornerback. Remember, he's transitioning from wide receiver to cornerback. And they feel like the Raiders don't want to ruin his confidence early by throwing him into the fire because of his inexperience at the position, period. I believe Levi said he hadn't played the position, until he transitioned in college at Iowa State. So this wasn't a guy who was playing cornerback growing up, high school, as soon as he got to college. He is still learning the position. And the way Levi framed it is he's still very green. So that's why the Raiders are hesitant to put him out there. But as Tarek said, Kyu Blu Kelly, and I hate doing this because it feels like I'm picking on him. Kyu Blu Kelly has been so awful, Scott.
Yeah, he has been.
I'd rather watch Darian Porter get out there and give up big plays or make some, I won't say big plays, but make some mistakes through the learning process than watch Kyu Blu Kelly get toasted. He's been in the league for what now, 4 or 5 years? You just say, hey, let's look at what we have in the upside. Same goes for Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant. You got Stone Forsythe out there. Everyone knows Stone Forsythe is not a very good left tackle. If you're going to move on from Dylan Parham, you might as well start to ease Caleb Rogers in there. He's a 3rd-round pick. The big question for me is, I wonder what the conversation was between Pete Carroll and John Spytek. Did they have an idea that these players weren't going to be ready this early in the season and it would take a while for them to get on the field? Or was there a conversation saying, we're going to draft these guys with the expectation from the play, and Pete Carroll is just stubborn about playing them? I want to know what that conversation is like, because John Spytek hasn't addressed the media since the Raiders have gone 2-5.
Yeah, and I think everybody would love to hear his thoughts on where they're at, because we don't hear all we hear from Pete Carroll is defense of his decisions, wrong or right. And so it's frustrating for fans because they're not, and that you find some hope in that. If John Spytek comes out and does a press conference and says, look, we like the 2 offensive linemen, we just don't feel like they're ready yet, but we expect them to see the field this year. Okay, great. Then you start to think
say that.
Right. He should say, because the coach isn't saying it. And I think fans also, Mo, and I want to see John Spytek exert his power, his control to say, hey, look, we have a plan. Here's what's going on. And because the perception now is that Spytek is like, with all due respect to him, another Mike Mayock. He's just there doing what the coach tells him to do. And you don't want that. You want to understand that Spytek actually has some method to the madness, and that would go a long way to alleviate that. So we'll see. All right, now it's time to wrap it up. Mo, I know, let everybody know what you got coming up this weekend for the Raider game and up on Bleacher Report and Sports Knock.
So, of course, I'll be live after the game. Raiders win, lose, or tie. I'm expecting a close loss. Scott has predicted a win, so hopefully it is a win. But regardless of the outcome, I will be live on Bleacher Report after the game. I'm also tracking all the trades that go down from today through the deadline on Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern time on Bleacher Report. So if the Raiders make any deals, I'll be breaking down the trade and grading it with my thoughts over there. So check out that if the Raiders do wind up moving some pieces or acquiring some pieces for the future.
Absolutely. And we will be live, myself and Murph from Raiders Fan Radio after the game, as always, to break down what happened in the Jaguars-Raiders game. So make sure you join us there. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get it. Of course, don't forget to rate and review. We appreciate that very much as well. My friend, I will see you next time.
Take care, Scott. Take care, Raider Nation.
All right. For Mo Moton and for our producer, Mike Robbie at Odyssey, and for our radio producer, Mark Bonilla, I'm Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black today. We'll talk to you guys all next time. Enjoy the game. Hopefully it's a win. I would love to be able to talk about a win for a change next time we speak to you. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game, and we'll talk to you next week.